Conservative blogs think that they have debunked the story of Charles Blow's son, his son who was held at gunpoint by a policeman outside of Yale. Now, they didn't debunk it in that it didn't happen. It did, in fact, happen. But they believe that the entire lesson that we're supposed to learn from it is now irrelevant once you consider the fact that the policeman was actually African American himself. Now, did that actually invalidate all of what we talked about in the wake of Charles Blow's story? Here is that question asked to Charles Blow.
Does the fact that the police officer involved is African American, does that change the equation in your mind in any way?
It doesn't for me, because when we have those conversations with our kids, we don't say, well, if you run into a white police officer, behave like this and this and this and this. And if you run into a black police officer, you don't have to worry about any of that. You do whatever you want to do, jam your hands into all your pockets and, you know, jump around and talk back. We talk about the police in general. And I am very happy that when he turned around and saw whoever was with the gun, that he didn't behave any differently. He didn't see any difference. He saw a gun and an officer, and he followed the very same script. You know, a bullet doesn't know the color of the finger that pulls the trigger. It doesn't care. Bullets don't have emotions. They have directions.
I like that last line.
Yeah, good line. So, the conservatives are a funny lot, right? If they find something that they weren't expecting in a story, they love to say debunked, right? So it's as if the kid didn't have the gun pulled on him. You know, the cop pulled a gun on him, say you match the description of a suspect. We've been through the story where we explain there's nothing wrong with a cop stopping somebody saying you match the description of a suspect. It happens to a lot of black people, but, you know, it happens to a lot of minorities, and of course in areas that are predominantly white, it happens to white people, of course, right? The problem was when he pulled the gun and pointed it at him before he had any idea who he was, right? So now that's a problem that exists whether the cop is white or black. Now, Charles Blow didn't mention that the officer was black, and they're like, debunked! Debunked! So now first, of course it's not debunked. The story happened either way, right? And the problem exists either way. But I realize after reading the conservatives' claims on this, why they think it was debunked. Because in their perception of it is that they think that Charles Blow is accusing all white people of being racist, right? So he's saying you pull guns on black kids because you're a racist and you hate black people. But that's not what Charles Blow is saying. That's not what we've been saying all along. We're talking about stereotypes. We don't think that you know, I was going to say Joe Blow. That would have been ironic. Okay. It's a random dude. Okay. We don't think a random white cop is racist and hates all black people. We think, and we've said this 1,000 times on the show, whites, blacks, every kind of race, unfortunately, has these stereotypes in the back of their head because of all the things that we've talked about. That's why when they see a black hand on eBay, in one of the studies that we often mention, selling something like an iPhone, that people will pay less money for it. They'll trust the guy. That's all it is, a black hand. They'll trust it less, like, oh, I have to verify how you're sending this, etc. Study after study shows this. But they don't say white people do that. They say all people do that, okay? So the problem is the stereotypes that exist in the back of our heads, and they exist in all our heads. We're not accusing you. Like that's what conservatives get so defensive. Like you're calling me a racist. You know, you're calling all whites racist. No, that's not what we're doing. We're saying, hey, if you're a black kid in America, you might have a gun pulled on you by a cop because of all the stuff that's going on in our culture that we have to fix and the stereotypes we have to get beyond.
Yeah. It's incredibly frustrating talking about politics in America for a lot of reasons, but one of the most frustrating reasons is when you realize that you can't talk to the other side because they don't understand the most basic version of your argument. That when you talk about evolution and they say, oh, so you think apes turned into humans, you think, wait, you don't know anything about this. We can't have this discussion. Or when they say global climate change can't be happening because it snowed in New York, you realize, wait, we can't even talk about the basics because you don't understand them. And if you think that the arguments that many communities in America are having right now with police departments across the country and have had for decades is purely that it's racism. It has nothing to do with abuse of authority. It has nothing to do with entrenched stereotypes. It has nothing to do with the fact that they protect their own, the inherent corruption of the prosecutors and the not being willing to go after cops. if you think that it's just about the racism, then how can we talk about fixing the problem? Because you understand the problems with the police as much as you understand evolution and climate change.
Yeah, but it did snow in New York.
It did snow, that's true. Not a lot, though.
This guy doesn't understand anything.
Exactly.
I'm starting to wonder about this.
I
guy.
mean, if you're going to say
Frustrated.
there's global warming when it's hot in the summer, can there be global cooling when it's cold in the winter? I mean, what the
Cyclical,
fuck?
it's natural cycle.
Right? It's just common sense. That's what we do. That's why I'm a conservative. We use common sense. I don't need your book bullshit.
Yeah. I did read that in a book, to be
snowing
fair.
equals not warm, jackass. Right?
That's right. Where's Al Gore? Where's Al Gore?
Black cop equals no problems with cops around the country.
I think Charles Blow did go on to make the point that it's not about and we've made this point, that it's not about a white or a black cop. It's about the culture of policing in America. It's about the mentality that exists in that culture. And no matter how good of a person you are, before you join that culture then co-opts you. I would say corrupts you. And then in all those unconscious biases and prejudices and all those, they get kind of, they're like virtuous almost, they become a virtue inside that culture. So, and anyone who pushes back against it is demonized as not being for law and order, not being, de Blasio is not supporting the police. So, again, that's why it doesn't, you're right, Cenk, it doesn't debunk the story. It wasn't about a white cop. It was about police, the way they handle African Americans. That's what it was about.
In his original column, did he make a distinction about black or white cops?
No, he
not.
didn't. So that's the only thing that I would have is a small criticism of Charles Blow. The funny thing is, and this is me being racialist, okay, that when I read the column, I thought it was a black cop based on what the cop had said, okay? But he didn't say black, okay? Now, but then I thought, and this all went through my head. I'm like, if it was a black cop, he probably would have said it, right? He's like, it's a black cop, but it doesn't really matter, la la la, right?
Yeah.
So since he didn't say it, then I went, by the end of the article, I was like, I guess it was white, but to me it didn't really matter, so I moved on with my life, right? But so I think he would have been better served if he'd put that in initially, just because of this.
Right.
Like when people find out, they're like, whoa, ah! Like as if he was hiding it when he probably. I'm sure he wasn't hiding it. He just didn't think it was relevant.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, actually, because this reminds me of something we talked about in the production meeting that I didn't express a minute ago. The most frustrating thing isn't that people think that chimps turn into humans, or that snow in the winter means that there's no global climate change, or that you have to be white for there to be a problem with the cops. It's that we keep clarifying those points over and over. It's not about chimps turning into humans. Snow doesn't disprove climate change. And it's a problem with cops, not a problem with white cops. We keep saying that, but we keep having to go back to page one. It's like it's not saving our game every time we make a little bit of progress. That is frustrating. We've been talking about this since George Zimmerman. As soon as they were like, oh, debunked, he's not actually white. It doesn't have anything to do with white people being suspicious of black teenagers. It has a problem with people being suspicious of black teenagers. And as a side note, from everything that I have since learned about George Zimmerman and his life, I think that he is now an honorary white Southerner.
Ha!